Welcome to the Coder Kids podcast. I'm James Thornock, your host. This is episode 37. Today on the podcast, we have a special guest, Bryant Noel. He works at Fearless. And if you want to kind of finish introducing yourself and fill in any spots that I missed, go for it.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks. So I am a Scrum Master at Fearless, which means that I work in a leadership capacity for teams doing software development, leading people toward what we believe to be better ways of organizing and accomplishing the work.
Yeah, so when I was on your website, I saw quite a bit of that, as well as the color purple, which is why my background is themed that way to kind of match. Y'all have like a purple sauce award and all sorts of purple cow and all sorts of good stuff. So for those of you who just listening in, it's all about the color purple. But all over your website, just you had to be blind not to see it, that was more important than anything, it seemed like to me at least, was just kind of the diversity of the cast and like people working together in harmony and like really well, and that the philosophy is that you make better products when the communication is good and that, you know, you're together on that. So is that a good summary? Is that oversimplifying things or?
Oh, no, that's definitely accurate. At Fearless, we definitely do believe in our purple sauce, and we have an affinity for purple cows. The reasoning being the purple cow stands out, and we do want to be different. So we believe in all of those attributes. And whenever we start talking about inclusion and diversity, we certainly do want to have as much of it as possible, because we believe that the more perspectives you can get to look at the way that we develop software and the way that software is used, the more success we're going to have overall. And everybody's voice has a purpose and has a reason to be involved in these conversations. So,
yeah, right on. Definitely. You're talking primarily about diversity of like user experience or racial diversity, or what are you focusing on
all of the
primarily?
above.
Okay.
That all people should be involved in the creation of this software.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Aaron was talking about this, earlier when we did the podcast with him, UX designer. And, we think of one of the problems when we're designing software and interfaces and things like that is like we design for us. And, it's like, well, if I were to make the perfect thing for me, how far would that go? And that would go for like really well with all the people that are exactly like me, who don't have any hair and right, who like have a cheap green screen in the background and whatever, and live in the burbs, right? So I think you're right. I think there's just things that we're blind to, and things that we can definitely use information on. So, you've got a leadership role there. What are the things that you're doing day to day to make it a well-oiled machine? And if you want to go back even further and just describe, what Agile is and what being an Agilist is, what you got an award for, like what are these things?
Yeah, definitely. So Agile is this newer approach to doing. I say newer. It's not newer anymore. It's been around for a while, since the late '90s. But it's newer to a lot of individuals, and a lot of people are adopting it still over time. And it's this idea that instead of having a fixed scope, you instead have a flexible scope for the work that you're accomplishing. So if you think about like more traditional project management, you tend to kind of like fall back to this iron triangle style approach, where you've got cost, schedule, and performance. So you can pick two. Do you want it cheap, fast, or complete? Mentality. And
Yeah.
that's not how Agile wants to do it. So whenever you think of the older ways of doing it, like waterfall, what you end up thinking about is, I come up with a long laundry list of requirements. The bridge must be 110 feet long and 4 lanes across. And if you make it to 99 feet, that's not good enough. I can't accept it, because the cars will not be able to drive the rest of the way. That's kind of a different approach to what we do. We do this mentality where the scope becomes flexible. And the way we do this is through the organization of the work. So instead of saying, for instance, with that bridge, if you made it to 99 feet across, you still need the bridge. You still need the 4 lanes, and you still need that extra foot. And if the construction contractor comes back and says that's going to be X dollars more to do and X many more months, you're not going to say no.
Yeah.
Almost certainly, you're just going to say, well, that's unfortunate. We have an overage on a cost and schedule, which is a very common thing in these fixed scope projects.
Right.
That's the flexible component, is the time and the cost. But instead, whenever you think about Agile, the flexible component becomes the scope. So we establish fixed time boxes where we say, we're going to deliver you something at the end of this time box. I'm not 100% sure what it's going to be. We've got some pretty good estimates, but we aren't certain. Instead, we've broken the work down into small enough deliverable components to get them to you as fast as possible. You've probably seen this on some interstates if you've been driving around recently, where they'll start to do 1 lane at a time on the bridge instead of just building the entire thing across. And that is a more agile approach to it. So instead we say, let's get you 1 lane across the river first, and then we'll build the second one, and then we'll build the third one. And that way, even if we get 75% done and get 3 of the lanes to you by our estimated time, you can start moving cars over the river. And that kind of sums up a little bit of how Agile applies, is this idea of flexibility. We acknowledge that requirements are going to change over time. It's going to happen, and that you have to be able to adapt to that.
Yeah. So if I was taking this and trying to apply it to, someone who's in grade school, right? And, we're talking to you parents who have kids in school who are maybe in a public school system or in a private school or a charter school or homeschool situation. And we value all of those models. It sounds like not so much like a memorize, deliver, and then test. This is more of like a collaborative, project-based learning where you're going to have some sort of project at the end of the semester, and it's going to look a little bit different than previous projects, but they're pretty good estimates. And so it's a little bit, it just seems more like a Montessori model, but like applied to,
Yes.
Building software. Is that accurate?
That's quite accurate. I'm not terribly familiar with Montessori, but from everything I've gathered, it is actually quite applicable to what we're talking on the Agile side of the house. There's this attempt to transfer this idea of Agile software development into education. It's EDU Scrum, and I think it's based out of the Netherlands. They've tried it at a couple of schools where they actually take the Scrum Framework, which is a mechanism to do Agile and meet the values and principles that have been decided upon that are Agile foundation components, and use that framework as a mechanism to deliver educational content as well. It's pretty fascinating to me.
That is interesting. I would be super interested in getting them on from the Netherlands. That sounds exciting. We had someone on from Sweden before, so it's in the same ballpark, I guess, if you will. I live in Texas, which is like a huge state, so I feel like it's like, well, that would just be on the other side of Texas, right? So
pretty much.
well, good stuff. So now that I think we have the framework, is there anything else that you wanted to say about like the general framework?
Just in general, that it is based upon some pretty simple and straightforward principles and values. They're all going to be out on a website, the agilemanifesto.org, which sounds harsher than it is. It's just four quick sentences and then 12 quick principles about these are the things that we hold to be valuable. These are the things that we hold to be true, and to be a northern guiding light toward all of the different ways that we accomplish this Agile intent. And that's a big component of all of this as well, is making sure that we get that intent and understand where it is we are going. This is for anything that we are doing, whether it's like organizational change or whether it's the development of software. If we can provide the intent to the individuals that are doing the work, they will be able to better establish how to do the work. And that ties back into one of the Agile principles around trusting self-organized teams to accomplish their work, because that's where the best value is going to come from. The person that is closest to the issue at hand is going to be the person best suited to solve it. They have the most information, and the choices that they make are going to be the most accurate because of that, with the presumption that you give them the intent on where you, as an organization or a company or a teacher, want the individual to go. So if you explain to them that I want you to tell me all about the Civil War, and I want you to focus in on this particular subject, and I want you to write me a page of this size. And then the student says, great, I'm going to write you a page and it's going to contain all of these great things. And you let them have the autonomy to do the work. They'll be able to select things that are more interesting to them. They'll be able to know the things that are going to get them across that finish line and be more successful.
Yeah. I was actually going to ask you to give it an example, and then you gave one. So that's fun. Actually, in a previous life, I was a history teacher, so that's pretty applicable, that example. And it does require. I feel like it does require a little bit extra work in the beginning, because it requires decision making. It requires autonomy and a certain level of freedom, right? And that's a little bit scary. But I think once you get going, then that fire is there, right? And is that something that you notice?
Yeah, you're going to get the best value out of individuals that feel empowered to make the decisions on what's going to impact them. So whenever we talk about software development, let's talk about a variety of different languages that you could choose. If I asked you to build me a website, I don't want to be prescriptive about what language you should use. I want to be open. I want to allow you the ability to choose your component library. I want to allow you the ability to select the things that you know and that you're going to have the most success doing. Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, if I were to dictate those decisions to you, could you do it? Probably. And could I establish a team that could do it? Absolutely. But you're going to find more success with the team that you have by letting them self-select the ways that they are best able to do it, because they know better than anybody else, whether it's a manager or a leader or anybody else involved, how to accomplish the work. But you as the customer know why you want the work accomplished and what you want the work to kind of look like on the other side. And that comes back to, those are guesses, those are estimates. Another good example that we like to use in Fearless is this idea of a house. So let's say that as the client, I provide to the realtor, I want a 3-bed, 2-bath, and I'd like to have a fireplace. And they go and they show me a 3-bed, 2-bath with a fireplace. And I walk in and I go, I absolutely did not want a mid-century modern house. Sorry. We can add that to the requirements list. And we got it wrong. The realtor thought they'd found a house that was going to be successful. We made it to the finish line. We thought we were done. We were not. And we were not because of no one's fault. The client provided the information they thought was relevant. They provided what they thought they wanted to see. They saw it and said, I was wrong. I want to see something else. Let's keep going. And that happens in software too. Often, you'll get to the point where you show them, this is how this would work based off of what we talked about so far. And then the conversation gets to happen. I really don't like that. I'd really like to be able to have a single sign-on option for this website instead of going through these 2-factor auths over here, and so on and so on and so on. And it's, we can do that too. It's going to take longer. We're going to need to talk to the team and talk about approaches to accomplish that, organize that work and establish it. And then we can start to estimate on when we think we're going to get there. But in the next time box, we'll be able to commit to this much and give it to you. And continue to go from there with continuous retrospectives on how we did in the last time box and what we want to change moving forward so that we can continue to improve.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. If I can maybe use an example, see if I actually understand this. So let's say you've got somebody who's, redesigning a website, and this is the wrong way to do it would be to say, hey, this piece of paper is a website, I want you to give me this rectangle, and I want you to give me this color, and I want you to give me, instead of treating like the people like computers, which is like what we do, we say, hey, this is the vibe I'm going for. These are the colors that we're using. and then you can pick from the set of colors, and you can pick from the shapes we're using, and then pick from the vibe, and then I trust you to figure out the rest of it. So is that accurate?
Absolutely.
Okay.
One of the ways I like to phrase it is I think of computer science as much art as science. What you are going to build is going to be a reflection of the individuals building it. And it's going to be complex and complicated. And there's 100 different ways to build the same thing. Some of them are technically superior to others, but some of them are better user experiences. Some of them offer less upfront complexity. Maybe it's easier to understand, offering more maintainability. Some of them offer a better architectural approach so that you can refactor various components more easily moving forward. And you have all of these trade-offs and all these ideas, and it's going to come down to, do you as the team have an understanding of the user need and values, what they view as important? How can you engage with them on those things, having those open and consistent conversations? Again, tying back to the Agile Manifesto and talking about the business and the team should work together daily, because you do want to have that really reduced feedback loop. You want to get to the point that you can say, even something as simple as just drawing something on a whiteboard and saying, I heard what you said. You want a new website that does these things. I'm thinking it could look like this. What do you think? Do you like that? Do you not like that? That realtor could have solved a lot of problems if he just sent a picture of the front of the house to the client and said, do you like this mid-century modern? And they'd been like, absolutely not. Let's start again. Let's try a colonial or whatever.
Yeah.
So
Ranch
early
style,
feedback is
geodesic dome,
fundamental.
concrete printed house. There are lots of. I'm super excited. This is total tangent, but like I cannot wait for concrete printed houses. Granted, you know we're not into printing circuits yet, although I think that's a thing. But I don't know. You know, like on a piece of paper, you can print a circuit now, but and you can order in circuit boards. But in terms of like doing the electrical wiring for a house, that's still got to be manual. The house still the roof still has to be manual. The foundation still has to be like done in a traditional way. But there's at least like the walls and like the space for insulation and stuff, you can print that. So I'm really excited. Total tangent, but to
I'm
really
excited
be
about
able
that.
to like design a house like in almost any shape that you can imagine that's structurally sound, and then the parameters for what is structurally sound with when you're printing in concrete, vastly broadens, right? Instead of just like everybody lives in a rectangle, like which, no hate on Western civilization for doing, you know rectangles. I'm very happy in my rectangular space right now, but I do think there could be some neat stuff in the future. Total tangent, but I get what you're saying.
Not
That's
a
pretty
tangent at all,
awesome.
actually. So you're talking about innovation and change and trying new things, and
Yeah.
that's again one of those fundamental parts of how Agile and Scrum and any other framework inside of Agile wants you to pursue. They want you to try new things, because the idea that you've ever met a standard measure of good enough or perfect is a fallacy. You want to continuously improve. You want to find, yeah, we're doing good work. We want to do better work, and we want to continue to improve over time. What experiments can we try? What innovations are out there? Should we try new things? If I were building houses and I was pursuing an agile mindset, I would want to start looking into, what can I 3D print? What can I build offsite and ship in on the back of a truck?
Yeah.
How can I reorganize the work to make it more effective? How can I break it into smaller chunks so that if my electrician is out sick on a day, I don't lose a day of work?
Yeah.
How can I get all of these different parts into place and make it work the way that is most effective for my team and the delivery of in software, usable software, but in housing industry, creation of a product.
Yeah, definitely. Oh man, and if you're buying a new house, I pity that person, because there's so many. A lot of the newer houses are just like replete with problems, right? So, uh, yeah, of course, old ones are too. My pipes just burst in that winter freeze that hit Texas, and I had to replace them all by hand. So that was fun. And then I had to think about, okay, well, do I want my pipes in exactly the same place? And the answer was no. And so we created a new map, and we put pipes in different places sometimes. Uh, and yeah, so it was interesting. So we have like an old kind of a husk of a house, but then we got completely new water lines. So in that question of what do I want this to look like? What are the things that can't change, right? Like, well, water has to come into the house. Okay, great. And then how does it need to be separated, and then how can we accomplish that? And yeah, that's how you deal with real problems in the real world, right? Like there's no like test that's going to prepare you for your pipes breaking. Like, I'm clearly not a plumbing expert, right? Like, this is not the uniform of a plumber. I'm way too pale. I don't have a truck full of tools and stuff like that, right? So, but I think these principles are good, kind of across they're interdisciplinary skills, which are really nice. So,
Yeah.
I do have some questions though that I like to follow up. So, Agile is the overall framework. Getting to be collaborative, working toward a rough goal within a time box. What is Scrum inside of that? Your title is Scrum Master. So, is Scrum a piece of software? Is it a method? What exactly
Yeah.
is that?
So Agile is not necessarily a framework. Agile is
Okay.
more of a mindset. Look at it
Okay.
more like your North Star. Uh,
Okay.
Strive to achieve these values and principles as prescribed by the Agile Manifesto. We have found success when we prioritize these things over other things.
Mm.
Uh, that's really the mentality that you need to have there, and it ties back into maintaining a growth mindset as well versus a fixed mindset. But whenever we start talking about what is Scrum, for example, Scrum is actually a framework. It
Okay.
gives you a not exclusionary, not prescriptive approach, but it gives you a bunch of steps, and it says if you do all of these things, you will align with the values and principles that the Agile Manifesto have laid out. You will be pursuing agility in the way that you develop and deliver software.
Okay.
So Scrum is a framework, and it's a series of interactions with how you and your team work on the problem.
Okay.
It involves 3 roles and a handful of ceremonies. So the 3 roles are going to be the Scrum Master, who is in effect a leader and cheerleader of Agile principles and values, and facilitator of these ceremonies to try to make sure that those intents are met from the Agile Manifesto and from the results expected inside of the Scrum ceremonies and interactions, and that the team's operating in an Agile way. You also have the product owner, who is a customer representative. They are empowered to make decisions and change things. So they're the individual that can tell the realtor, I do not want a mid-century modern, or I do want a colonial. They are the decision point. They make decisions, and they represent all of the various stakeholders' viewpoints when they make those decisions. That's going to require a lot of prioritization of the work. So that
Yeah.
ties us into a couple of the artifacts within Scrum. So you've got a product backlog, which is an organization of a bunch of items, wish list items. How important is the pool in your house? How important is the fireplace? How important is hardwood floors? Whatever is on your priority list.
Yeah.
Would a 2-bedroom with all of these other things be better, or do you really need a 3-bedroom house? So they create this prioritized list of upcoming work. And the team can help with the creation of that, and so can the Scrum Master, and organize this work and try to break it into smaller and smaller and smaller pieces. so that the work is more attainable, more successful, can be pulled into those time boxes to be successful.
Gotcha.
You then,
Okay.
yeah, so it's a framework. It's got a bunch of different steps. I could certainly keep going if you'd like, but at the end of the day, the idea is you establish the work that the anticipated scope of work that's upcoming for usually a bit of a tail on it, just to make sure that you have a few months out, maybe a couple months out worth of upcoming work understood. You have their highest needs established. You start to work through those because the idea is you want to deliver the smallest piece of useful software as fast as possible, and you want
Yeah.
the piece that you deliver to be the most useful piece. So if it's fundamentally important that you have a login page, and then that login page is going to show you the variety of courses that your school offers, maybe that's the most important thing. You just need a page that shows the courses offered. All right, that's the thing that we should build first then. And then after that,
That's
you want
what
to
we
start
built
building.
first. To be,
Exactly.
that's where you can sign up for Code Your Kids classes and camps. There's my plug. We built that registration page. That's done. You're absolutely right. Like, and that was the thing that had to be done first, and then we added the blog and much later the podcast and the YouTube channel and all the free Minecraft server. So you're absolutely right.
So that's the mentality: is organize the work, prioritize it by the thing that gives you the most value, finish that value so you can get that return on investment as fast as possible. And at some point, you're actually going to make it down the list. You're going to be whenever you get to the point of maybe your Minecraft server number 4 or whatever stops being worth the input, and you say, we
Yeah.
don't need to do that. Actually, this has been fun. Thanks.
Right.
We've got these other priorities now that are far more important than Minecraft server 4.
Right, yeah, absolutely. And, if Minecraft Server 4 becomes like the newest, biggest thing and it generates revenue and whatever, then we can say, well, maybe it's a separate business, or maybe we're going to focus on it and shift. And so the priorities shift. I'm assuming Scrum's allowing for reprioritization of goals, right?
Constantly.
Okay.
Reprioritization should happen consistently inside of the product backlog. The way
Okay.
that it handles that as for the team is the team establishes a sprint backlog, and a sprint is going to be that time box. Usually it's about 1 to 4 weeks. Most people have settled on about 2 from what I've seen. And what you end up doing is at the beginning of the 2 weeks, you work with the product owner and the team, the Scrum Master, to establish what is being pulled in from the product backlog and into the sprint backlog. The team makes a commitment that the entire team is going to accomplish the work that they agree to. That doesn't always happen, and failure is okay because you're going to learn from it. But as a general matter, you try to estimate what you think it's going to take to do these things as far as level of effort, not necessarily time, but level of effort. And then you try to organize that into these are the things that the team's going to work on for the next 2 weeks. You realign on those each day with a ceremony called the daily stand-up, or first thing in the morning, you spend 15 minutes. Ideally, everybody stands up, although in the pandemic, we've been sitting down a lot at our desks and on Zoom. And then you talk about, what did you do yesterday? How did that go? And the intent is not for a status update, but for a communication of, how did things go? Did you do the things you thought you were going to get done? Were you wrong? What do you think you're going to be doing today? Do those things you think you're going to be pursuing line up with what the rest of the team thought you were going to be pursuing? And then you have the last question is there anything getting in your way? Do you have any blockers? And the goal of that is that the Scrum Master is going to work to eliminate those impediments as best as possible. So let's say that you need to buy a new piece of software to support your initiative. And you say, I actually can't write this next piece of code until I have that software. The Scrum Master should take a note and go, and if the Scrum Master can't buy the software, should talk to the person that can and get it bought.
Yeah.
And that keeps that train flowing. At the end of the time box, you then demo all of the capabilities that you completed to the people that are going to use it. And I like to have the actual people that wrote the software demo the capabilities because I really like that one-to-one communication. it's also recommended that you have the product owner demo that capability, because they're the person that has the more direct business relationship with those stakeholders as their representative.
Right on. Okay, so
And then
go ahead.
one last item, you have
Sure.
the Scrum retrospective, which is where you do that inspect and adapt piece, which is one of my favorite components, because you get to look back at the last iteration and say, how did we do? Did we do what we thought we were going to do? What worked well? What didn't work well? And how do we want to change moving forward? And that comes into that innovation and experimentation that you were talking about earlier. You establish experiments, you try them during the next iteration, and then you reflect on it at the next retrospective, and you continue to do that forever.
Awesome. Well, this sounds like a really good system. I mean, I think it makes sense. I think it's largely, roughly speaking, compatible with the Montessori, model of education. Yeah, I think it's really compelling. I did have a couple follow-up questions about it. One of those is, what percentage of the industry, if you just had to throw a number out there, do you think is running something like Agile, or Agile, with a capital A, or something that's like it?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different frameworks out there that are Agile, based heavily on lean principles and practices. And I guess as kind of a question to your question, which industry?
I guess I'm
Are you?
specifically talking about like software development, game development, So if I had to say like specifically that, and kids going into that, in their future, their future careers, like what would you say the industry is like at this point versus companies that say like, we have to produce exactly this, it's gonna have this budget or whatever, and there's not the same feedback, and feedback opportunities and prioritization, all the other things we talked about.
No, absolutely. I would say the majority of software development is using some form of Agile at this stage. There are some late adopters, of course, out there that still are transitioning into using this. But to put it into context, I'm working with the Department of Defense and the government on pursuing Agile practices within their approaches.
Heaven knows they need it.
And if you talk about late adopters,
right?
I forget. I think it was it XP that the military paid an additional wild amount of money to keep in support because they didn't want to change.
I don't remember. Yeah,
it was something like that.
Sounds very believable. Somebody I don't have a Jimmy to fact check things, but yeah, that sounds. I mean, that sounds believable, right? So
I don't remember which version of Windows it was, but I do recall there had been payments made to continue support after end of life because they had systems that they just didn't modernize off of it. And if you look at that from that kind of context, these groups that are historically late adopters are now pursuing this approach. So it has been brought in throughout the majority of more modern development options.
So then I'll ask you the other question, which is, industries at large. I mean, do you think they're moving in this direction? Do you think coding is moving in this direction more quickly because it's so competitive, or they're just like Silicon Valley, minded people, and they like breaking stuff and creating new stuff? Anyway, yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts, and then your thoughts about those thoughts.
Yeah. So yes, I think that the speed at which our environments change have made it so we cannot predict as far out as we used to be able to. So you think about how we used to do business. We used to be able to say, I'm going to build this new software and I'll release it sometime in the next year, sometime 2 years from now, or whatever. That format isn't working anymore. Things are changing so quickly. If you are trying to build something to meet a business need, you must build it and you must deliver something very rapidly. And the idea that even by the time you get that first draft out, it could be wrong. And you need to be able to adapt and adjust again is fundamental to why I believe Agile is going so well, because requirements always changed, but now they are changing even faster. And they're going to keep changing faster. There'll be a new piece of technology that comes out that helps accelerate what you're building and why you're building it. And you'll need to be able to integrate with that quickly. You'll come up with an interface for a new product that was released, and you want to get that out quickly. And your changes and prioritizations are fundamental. A product example that I like to use in some of the trainings that I give is this idea that 15, 20 years ago, whenever Apple came out with the iPhone, I'm certain that Motorola had an amazing flip phone that they were about to release. And if they didn't change direction, would their company still be making phones? And I think that the speed at which you could change direction and adapt is a measure of how successful you will be. And that's in software, that's in product development, that's manufacturing, anything and everything in between. You need to be able to adapt to the changing environment to be able to move toward where the target is going so that you can hit it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most brutal lesson of this was like all the business ideas that were great in 2019, right? And, my heart goes out to all those, we have a competitor that will remain nameless, but they teach coding for kind of a similar demographic as us, but they are in typically strip malls or that type of facility, and so they're paying rent basically for a year and getting no foot traffic, and those those franchisees were kind of stuck with the bill because the business model was set for a different era, and it was really hard for them to pivot because they were locked into this rent thing. Fortunately for us, we were able to pivot all of our, well, not all, but the vast majority of our in-person classes to online, and now we're reversing. We're getting back to in-person stuff, and but I think moving forward, like you said, being flexible, where we've posted on-demand content and then online classes, and I think that's always going to be a part of our business going forward, but it wasn't originally, and if we didn't switch to that, I can promise you we'd be out of business by today, for sure, like 100%. And a lot of after-school companies have indeed gone out of business because of that. So, yeah, no, you're absolutely right. You have to be agile, and it helps. I mean, we don't create. Well, I guess that's not true. We did create a website, right? So we have developed something, but I mean, that's not our product. Our product is education, classes, after-school programs, summer camps. And we have to be agile, and we have to change and learn with these things. I did want to ask you about your experience at the Air Force. You did have some time there. I'm wondering how that's informed your workflow and how you relate to people and all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am prior Air Force. I spent 6 years in. One of the things I find fun is one of the founders of Scrum is also an Air Force vet from the academy. Neither here nor there, but it's just a fun little tidbit that I enjoy. But how it influenced me and the way that I engage on things is this idea that the mission is important. The goals that you pursue are fundamental to success, and understanding that intent is valuable. That's something that within the military is certainly understood on the more operational side of the house. Whenever you start thinking about the people that make the decisions on the front lines are certainly empowered and enabled to make the decisions that are most applicable to their environment. And they follow that mentality well. They provide the goals and the intents and then allow for the execution of them. Whenever you think about how can we better engage and help with the pursuit of their humanitarian aid missions and all of their other supports there, it's really beneficial to be able to support them and to continue to grow those missions toward their success, both in the defense of us as well as the support of our allies.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah,
Um,
go ahead.
I also wanted to talk a little about just teamwork in general and what that really looks like. So this idea that you want to have your entire team engaged and supporting each other also ties back into Agile. This mentality that whenever somebody's designing something or somebody's developing something, you want to have that cross-functional knowledge so that you don't have to know everything about design, but being able to look at it and understand why and the intent behind it and being able to accomplish the goals and work with the individuals gives you a better understanding of where you're going next and why that's important. To tie that back toward an education standpoint, you can think about group projects.
Yeah.
And you can think about how cumbersome group projects can be. And I love that we are doing more and more group projects throughout the education environment, because at the end of the day, we don't do anything alone anymore.
Yeah.
Everything we do requires other people. And fundamental to the success of that engagement with those other people is going to be the ability to communicate, the ability to have open, transparent, and trusting conversations about, I trust that you are going to put your effort in on this. I trust that we are going to be able to accomplish the intent. And I've been able to provide this intent from the stakeholder, the teacher, or whoever. And we've been able to come to a consensus on what that is and how we as a group want to pursue it. And that's going to lead to far better outputs and products and outcomes than if we were to just all run in our own direction by ourselves. So this idea that our teams are going to be able to work together is really important. And those are the reasons that I ended up pursuing more Scrum work instead of more software development work. Is I loved the ability to engage with the people and to be able to help grow and be able to help facilitate that communication and to try to make sure that we were able to meet that intent and that we were all on the same page.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So, applying what you just said to, the kid in elementary school, middle school, high school, who's, maybe they're definitely tech interested. They, maybe they'll be a coder in the future. They're looking at different career options. Maybe seriously, maybe not. What are some things that they can do? Just like real concrete things that they can do to help practice this mindset.
Yeah. Work with each other as often as you can, because that is going to be the best way to start to grow that conversation. But also approach any communication that you're going to have with each other with empathy. Try to empathize with the other person. Understand where they're coming from. Try to establish those whys. Listen more than you talk, and try to deliberately listen to the things they are telling you. So whenever you're going through the question and you're writing, maybe you're writing some large presentation on the Civil War, going back to that history example,
right?
And you've got a group of 3 people that are all supposed to talk about different aspects of it. Which aspect do your teammates want to talk about? Like, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to adjust the ways that you're wanting to talk about things, but figure out, where are your strengths? Where can you support the best? How can you help? Where is your team's weaknesses? What do you need to research still? What don't you know? Start having those continuous conversations, digging in deeply, thinking about where you're going to be able to best apply your abilities, and also listen to where your teammates think they can best apply theirs. And just having that open and honest conversation and being humble about the fact that you probably don't know everything. And that's perfectly fine.
If you're in 5th grade, there's no way you know everything. I'm just laying it out. You can't. So, well, and you can't ever. And that's the true thing. Just ask Aristotle, right?
I was going to tie that into like tech. You cannot know every language. You can't know every architectural pattern. You're not going to know everything that there is to know about tech. In fact, you probably won't know the majority of it. It's far more important that you, as a good member of the team, acknowledge what you do know, but also very fundamentally acknowledge what you don't know, and then have a good path to learning those things. So being a continuous learner, wanting to try new things and experiment, and acknowledging that we're not the best we can be. That ties back into that growth and fixed mindset, which
Yeah.
I want to see in individuals and in teams. I want to see individuals support a growth mindset that it's not about how well I'm doing today. It's about how well I did yesterday versus today and how well I'm doing tomorrow. And at no point should a consideration of how well somebody else is doing ever enter into that equation. It's all about you. You're running your own race and you're trying to beat your own personal best time.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It sounds like, if you really want to make software development your thing, or if you want to operate in the tech space or user experience or anything like that, I mean, if I'm picking up what you're putting down, it's that you really have to learn to talk to people and work on these interpersonal soft skills. I mean, they're called soft, they're difficult, but that I think you're right. You said this before we started recording, but this idea that Alan Turing, who the Turing test is named after, and obviously he wrote essentially what you said were decision trees and things like that, which would be understandable and comprehensible to us today. The principles of coding, the principles of building stuff are the same, but I think the actual application of it is harder to do on your own, and so you need a team to be able to do that. And so, in my experience, hiring people and interviewing people and talking to young people, I'm talking, second grade, third grade, the stuff that really needs to be worked on and it takes time, years to really develop properly. It's just communication, people talking, being honest, being vulnerable. And I learned a lot of it on my feet, selling pest control door to door for like 5 years. I learned how to talk to anybody. It was great. It was so hard and sweaty and uncomfortable, and there's just a ton of rejection. And not everybody gets that awesome opportunity to, to sweat it out and to talk to people that don't want to talk to you. So now I can sit in a nice soft chair and talk to Bryant here, and we both want to be here, and we're both excited about what we can produce. And I think the reason we're recording today is because we're excited about the future, and I guess to use the name of your company, right? That the future is fearless, right? That you trust that your companions and your group mates are going to be, have your best interests at heart. And that's not always the case if you don't get to choose your group mates, but I think generally speaking it is. And those are some concrete takeaways that we can have is, if you're working on a history project, what part do they like to do? What part do you like to do? Maybe it's the same part. Maybe you just take that same thing, but from two different angles, right? So,
I think probably the last takeaway on that is you mentioned that things have gotten more complex over time, and that's 100% accurate. That's why one person can't do everything anymore. Everything is getting more and more complex, and it takes so many more people to accomplish work. The work that comes out the other side is beautiful and it's amazing, but it takes so much more due to the complexity. And the only way to really reduce that complexity down is to be open and transparent in your communications and to trust each other that you're going to be able to lift each other up and take on different aspects and work together.
And just a quick note about AI. I know AI is always the big boogeyman, but I don't think this is something that AI can do yet because it's so definitively human, right? And so the skills that a robot can do, or an artificial intelligence, not a robot, those are different, but they can't effectively communicate with humans, and like that's what we need humans for, is that we need really good communicators. So even in software, where you think it's nuts and bolts and ones and zeros and on switches and off switches, that you'd need the super scientific brains, and we do, but we need a lot of soft squishy skills, and so that is absolutely wild. So if you want to practice, if you want to get ready for a career, or you just want to have good time talking to people, I mean, conversations like these are useful, I think. But invite your friends over to play video games and talk about what objectives in the video game you want to do. What do you want to build in Minecraft? What does it look like? These questions are all great practice. And when they become natural, then you have this kind of superpowered set of skills, I think. Is that what you're putting down?
Pretty much. Like I said earlier, it's as much art as it is science.
Right.
And AI can emulate art, but they can't create new innovative thought yet. They still need people to provide that direction. If you give them every requirement, they can probably recreate the exact house that you want 100 times, but it's going to be the same rectangle over and over and over again.
Right.
And you can give them parameters, but it's still going to play in those parameters. They aren't going to innovate. They aren't going to improve. We have to, if we want to actually stay relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else that you'd like to say to the individual growing up is tech interested?
Keep being interested. That's the most important thing. Is don't get discouraged by not knowing something. Don't get discouraged by failing. The point of failure is to learn from it. I've learned more from my failures than I have from my successes. Whenever we get to fail, we get to find ways that it didn't work, and eventually we will find some way to do it better. And once we find that better way, we get to continue down that path forever. As I mentioned earlier with the growth mindset, the idea is to pursue your own personal best and make that best something that you're interested in performing in, whether it's music or whether it's art or whether it's computer science, whatever it happens to be. Pursue it and have fun with it.
Awesome. Well, we'll go ahead and put different ways to contact you if you'd like people to contact you in the show notes, whether that's Twitter or email or whatever. But other than that, thanks for listening today, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks.